So far in this short series of videos, we've really focused on how you can kind of get started and get going with strategy dynamics as part of your normal strategy teaching. But it'll become apparent when you start looking at the classes that it can take you far further than those first basic steps. So what I'd like to do in this short video is just give you some examples of the extra steps that you can take once you've mastered the core ideas of the method. In the first 4 classes, we construct this idea of a business model being driven by the interdependence between customers, products, staff, and capacity. We then go on to add a series of extensions to that core architecture in the remaining classes of the course. Now, as well as extending the basic strategy analysis, it turns out that each of those frameworks is extremely useful on its own, as well as when it's used as part of the strategy analysis for a whole business. So let's just start with a short extract from class 4, which talks about this idea of the core strategic architecture.
And we're going to look at how this business runs over 26 weeks. That's the first 6 months of operations. First of all, this relationship between price, customers won, marketing, and so on. This part of the diagram shows customers being won on the right-hand side from a pool of potential customers over on the left. And on the far right, we've got the same chart we saw about meals sold per week, and that number increasing and then flattening for the last few weeks of the period. And that's come from successfully growing the customers and then the customers remaining stable. But the meals sold per week depends on how often those customers actually come. So the chart at the bottom right shows the number of weeks between each customer's visit. So you kind of ask the customer, "Nice to see you, Joe. When were you last here?" "Oh, I think I was here about 4 weeks ago." So you can see that customers, first of all, didn't come back very frequently, every 6 or 7 weeks. But by about week 15, they were coming really quite often, probably less than 4 weeks between the average customer visit. So we've got more customers, so more meals sold. Where do those customers come from? Well, marketing brought in customers first of all. You can see the new customers from marketing number kind of creeping up. It looks like it hit about 80 per week, about the middle of the period there. But it looks like we're getting no customers from marketing, presumably because we aren't doing any marketing anymore. Why did we do that? Well, because it looks as though people started recommending our restaurant to their friends. So we thought, okay, we don't need to spend marketing money because people are coming because their friends are recommending them. And that seems to have worked out with the new customers per week, growing quite strongly and still continuing even though we've stopped our marketing. Now we come to the tricky issue of how we actually work out this balance between supply and demand and what it does to the quality of what we offer. On the left side of the diagram here, we've got the maximum number of meals that staff can serve, and at the top we've got the meals that we're actually selling. And it's the balance between those two that accounts for this work pressure that the staff are under. You can see that sales were quite a lot more than staff capacity. That's what those 2 little chevrons mean. Sales are much greater than the staff capacity. So work pressure got quite high. The result of that is that service quality dropped from around that 15-week point in time. So we've got how people feel about quality. How do they feel about the value for money they're getting when they come? Well, that's finishing the last connection with the price that we're charging. So down at the bottom of this diagram, we've got that same chart of what people felt was an acceptable meal price, rising from quite a low level up to quite a high level of around $50. And above that, you can see the price we've actually been charging during that period. We started with a price of less than $50. As people got happier and happier, we raised the price until it was $50. And because they were so happy, we thought we could get away with another increase in the meal price and put it up to $60. Now, if you're a customer and the price of a full meal in a restaurant is more than you expect, what do? Well, you're likely to say, well, let's pass on coffee and have coffee at home, or let's not have a dessert. what you do is you spend less than you would do if you took the full meal that the restaurant was offering. The second thing you do is that you say to your friends, well, that was a very nice meal, but it was really quite expensive. We were thinking of going back to the restaurant this weekend, but let's not. It was quite costly for what we got. So the other thing you do is you don't go back. So those are the two consequences of charging higher prices than people feel is okay. So down at the bottom right, we've got customers spending less because of poor value for money. And up at the top, we've got customers being lost because of poor value for money, especially in recent weeks. So here is the income statement diagram that we started with, and we've effectively completed a whole business model of this restaurant that explains what's happened to its revenue and its profit history. Sales grew from a wider menu, driving higher revenue, except when service quality dropped. Price increases led to less spending and hit revenue. The wider menu raised food cost per meal, so we reduced the menu again. We stopped marketing when new customers started coming from recommendations, and we did that because that was a cost that we could save. Our staff increases raised our costs, but now we've got lower staffing because we reduced the number of staff by one, and that's now reduced costs but damaged our sales. As a result, profit hit our objective but has now fallen back again. Now, if you think back over the last few screens we've shown you, there's actually quite a lot going on here, so it's not really practical to show you a diagram of the whole model, but this is a working model and you have access to that as part of this class.
Hopefully that's given you a sense of what we mean by the core strategic architecture and how that can be used to understand the performance of a particular case example, or indeed the examples that come up in this course itself. Now, as I mentioned, these extra frameworks in the later classes can be useful on their own or when added to the strategy analysis for the whole business. So let me just give you an example of one of the principles here, the idea that resources develop through different stages. We have inexperienced staff and experienced staff. We have junior, middle and senior staff, for example. We have products going through a product development pipeline. We have customers who are unaware of us. They've heard of us, they are disloyal customers or they're loyal customers. So pretty much all of the resources in the system go through development stages. So I'll just give you a short extract demonstrating how that principle applies in one particular case.
We explained in the summary segment of this class that not all resources improve as they develop through the business. Customers get more valuable to us, staff get more experienced and can deliver more work for us. But certain other resources actually deteriorate and get worse. And we mentioned this example of assets in companies that are very asset intensive. They've got lots of equipment. Equipment starts off shiny and new, and after bedding in, it's reliable for a long period of time. Then it starts to degenerate until it becomes unreliable, and the failure rate of the whole system depends on how many units are failing at what rate in each of those states. And we explain how companies spend maintenance money to slow down that deterioration rate, and they spend capital to replace equipment that's got to be scrapped. And we mentioned that this issue dominates strategy in utility companies like water and power, but it's critical in other capital-intensive industries like the oil industry and mining and steel. What we're going to do is look in a bit more detail at a particular example of how this is used. And this example concerns a power distribution company. They get power from power stations, they distribute it through their cables and switches to consumers and business customers. Now, an important thing to bear in mind in this particular case and in other similar cases is being in a developed economy, there's effectively no growth in demand here, so there's nothing on the kind of marketing end of the business that this company can do. So managing its performance is very much about keeping a good grip on the state of its assets. What are the decisions that the company is making here? Well, the spending decisions they're making divide into two broad classes. There's maintenance expenditure that is committed to the reliable and degenerating units to make sure that they live their maximum life in those states. And these items are then major routine operating costs, or OPEX as it's known. The companies also spend capital, summarised as CAPEX, to recondition units that have degenerated. And what that does is that if you take a piece of equipment out, you take out bits that have failed altogether, you put new bits back in, and then the whole unit is effectively like new again, and it goes right back up to the top of the chain and can be reliable for a long period of time. The other type of CAPEX they spend is on replacing unreliable units completely. They scrap them and buy shiny new ones. The particular company we're looking at has got this number of units in these different states. So this is the situation after 16 years of this company's history that we've been tracking. And you can see that what's happening on the left is that nothing much has changed about the number of units that are bedding in, and that there was a slight increase in the number of reliable units, a slight decrease in the number of degenerating units, and very little change in the number of unreliable units. If you look at towards the end of each of those charts, though, towards 2016, you'll see that things are looking at just a little bit worrying. There's a slight increase in the number of degenerating units, and there's a little bit of an increase in the bottom right in the number of unreliable units. On the right, you can see what the company's been doing on the spending rates for these things. So it spent quite strongly on maintenance, both on reliable units and degenerating units, for the first 8 years of this period. And the company was then taken over by another owner who wanted to kind of squeeze more profit out of the business, and they looked at what the company was spending on maintenance and said, well, we can save a bit here, we don't need to spend all that on maintenance. And a little later, the company said, well, I think we can save some more money, we don't need to spend all this capital either. So it cut back the amount of money it spent on reconditioning the units in the business, and it cut back a little bit on the replacement capital as well. If you look at the bottom left of the diagram, you can see that failures stayed at a reasonably low level but are now starting to rise. But the company was very successful in achieving its financial aims. The cutback in maintenance first of all increased its net cash flow in a really quite substantial step about year 8, and then in year 10 or 11, when they cut back on the capital expenditure as well, then the cash flow really got very strong. But where we are now is that cash flow is actually beginning to get worse, and the main reason why it's getting worse is because it is now suffering penalties because of that rising failure rate over there on the left.
So that video extract has shown how we communicate this idea that the resources develop through stages. Let's move on now and have a look at the issue of competition. In Class 7 we talk about 3 distinct mechanisms by which competition between rivals plays out over time. The 2 issues on industry dynamics we're going to look at in this segment. First of all, we're going to look at how the entry of new competitors into a market impacts on profitability and can lead to the exit of competitors who fail. If too many competitors try to get in and damage profitability, then some of those are going to fail and leave the marketplace. We're also going to look at an interesting issue of how competition plays out when you've got successive generations of products and each competitor launches a new product competing against a similarly specified new product from another competitor. So let's start by looking at that first issue. If you've got multi-competitor rivalry going on, what's happening is that between them all of the competitors are using up all of the potential customers for the marketplace. Typically what you find is, because there are relatively few competitors who kind of know how to do this thing early on in the industry's life, early growth and just a few competitors mean that the situation can look quite profitable, and the early competitors enjoy quite a nice time. But of course what that does is it encourages new competitors to enter the marketplace. So strong profits, many competitors enter, and the number of competitors
grows and then reaches a peak as the entry rate slows down. Why does the entry rate slow down? Because the entry of so many competitors means that they compete away the profits. They cut the prices, or they spend more and more on marketing, or they keep spending more on improving the products. But whatever the mechanisms, profitability actually gets damaged by there being so many people trying to go after the same marketplace. Now, that may be the average profitability of the industry at that point, but amongst the competitors, there'll be some who are really struggling. What then happens is that you see competitors actually going bust and leaving the market. And over a period of time, those loss-making competitors leave the industry. The number of competitors drop down. And if the number of competitors drops enough, you can actually see profitability recovering again. It's not necessarily the case. It depends on how strongly motivated each of the competitors is to kind of hang on in there and try and make a living in this more mature industry. And of course, if on the left-hand side, the arrival of more competitors, the reduction in prices, the improvement in the products and services continues, then between them all, they can bring more and more potential customers into the marketplace, which just makes this process go on longer with more and more competitors coming in and going out. Now, we've actually thought about a situation where this is actually happening, and the situation is the dynamics of the European low-fare airline industry. This chart here shows the stock, the number of low-fare airlines operating in Europe between 2000 and 2009. What happened to make that particular pattern happen? Well, here's the profitability up at the top right of Ryanair and EasyJet, the two strongest competitors in this marketplace. And you can see that their operating margins, and excluding the depreciation on their aircraft, was really pretty strong back in 2001, 2002. Ryanair was turning in over 35% in profit margin, EasyJet 20-25%. And of course, if you're an enthusiastic executive in the airline industry and you see that kind of thing going on, you think, hey, here's a great opportunity. I think I'll start up a low-fare airline and try and do what they've done. And that is, of course, exactly what happens. Down at the left-hand side, that's the number of new competitors entering the European low-fare airline industry during that period. 5 each in 2000, 2001, then 10, then 13, then 10 again for a couple of years. But as that profitability got more and more difficult, you can see in the last few years of that period, very few new competitors started up at all. But as I say, as that profitability comes down, other airlines find it more and more difficult to survive. And to complete the picture of the number of airlines, what we need to see is how many airlines actually exited this industry. And here it is. Nobody exited in 2001, 2002. 2 airlines failed in 2003. But then the failure rate really grew very strongly, with 7 or 8 or 9 airlines failing every year. Not all of those actually went bust and had to be kind of wound up. Quite a few of those ended up having to be bought out by other airlines. But about 2/3 of those actually did fail. And just one detail point you might notice towards the end there, that there is a little upkick in the number of competitors that failed in 2009. And it's probably not a coincidence that that happened just 1 year after that sharp fall in profitability at Ryanair. In previous classes in this course, we've looked at what Ryanair was doing with its fares, and a substantial reason for that drop in profitability in 2008 for Ryanair was a substantial cut in fares. Now, if you're a less successful and less efficient competitor to that airline, and they really pile down the prices they're charging, it's just going to make it much more difficult for you. And it's probably not a coincidence that a substantial number of airlines died the year after Ryanair made that move on its fares. So that video extract has hopefully given you a sense of how we communicate the idea of competitive dynamics
with this approach. Let's move on now and pick a topic right from the end of the course, which is about an organisation's capabilities. Capabilities may be to do with operational effectiveness, or they may be to do with how strongly and sustainably a business is able to build and keep the resources it needs.
The better you get at this thing, the better you perform, the more you learn. So you get this self-reinforcing interdependence between the resource and the capability that builds it. But once again, the better you get, the less scope there is to improve further. So let's look at an example of just one strategic capability for one kind of business. And this is a large-scale retail operation, a supermarket chain, for example. At the moment, it's only got 20 stores, and it estimates that those 20 stores can reach about 5% of a national market. What's the capability that we're interested in here? Well, it's the capability to grow that chain of stores. And currently, the company is adding 2 stores per month. At the moment, each new store takes 30 months from the decision to open that store to the store actually being opened and trading. That might seem a long time, but if you think about it, you've got to, well, first of all, you've got to identify the town where you're going to open the store. Then you've got to do quite a lot of research about what possible locations there are where a store could be constructed. You've got to negotiate with the local planning people. You've got to find the piece of real estate where the store is going to be. You've got to get the store designed and built, and that's quite time consuming. Also, each of these stores reaches only 60% of the consumers that a perfect location in that town would actually reach. So we're not as good as we could be at finding the perfect location for these stores. And at the moment, each of these stores is costing 1.1 million to buy and develop. Maybe if we were better at this, we could do it more quickly and we could do it more cheaply. So there again, those are our 3 benefits from a strong capability. How quickly is it done? How good is the product of actually doing this task? And how low can we get the cost? So we're going to look at how this business develops over 5 years. We're looking at 60 months of elapsed time. And initially, the company is opening 2 new stores per month. After month 12, management says things are going really well, so we're going to increase our store opening rate still further to 4 stores per month. And after a further 12 months, then things are going even better, and they decide to increase the store opening rate yet again to 6 stores a month. But remember, it takes 30 months to actually open a store between the decision to open it and actually having it open and trading. So here in the middle, you can see the growth of the store network, the number of stores operating over that 60-month period. It takes us 30 months to open each store. So here is the gap between when we took the decision, that's the bottom chart, and when the new stores were actually opened, that's the chart above that. There's a 30-month delay between those two. That leads to the growth in the number of stores and profitability shown on the right. But this is actually really rather a low capability, because when we look around, we work out that we should be able, if everything worked out perfectly, and we're absolutely brilliant at this, to get each store open in 15 months, not 30. The ratio between the 15 months it could possibly take and the 30 months it actually takes is 2 to 1. So that implies that our store opening lead time capability is only 50% of what it could be. Could we do better than this, and how much difference would it make? Well, in this scenario, in the blue, our capability is now 70%. It only takes us 21 months to open each store rather than 30 as it was before. And you can see that we've shortened the lead time between the decision that we took to open the store and the store actually coming online. That means that the number of stores we're operating grows not to 186 but 222, and our profits by the end of the 5 years are not 2.05 million, they're 2.3 million. That's not quite the end of the story though, because as you do more of this, presumably you get better at it. So how does getting better actually work? Well, in this diagram at the bottom, we're showing the extra experience that comes from opening each additional store. So right at the beginning, we've got 20. we're opening 2. That's 10% additional experience. We're opening another 10% of stores relative to what we've had in the past. Now, of course, as you open more and more, you've got less and less to learn because you've had plenty of store opening experience before. But when you raise the rate to open 4 stores per month, then that's accelerating your rate of experience once again. But that experience feeds back over on the left-hand side to raise your lead time capability. So your capability started at 50%. It took you 30 months to open each store. But because you're learning and getting better at it all the time, your capability is rising to 60%, 70%, 80%. So learning increases our capability. That means that we increasingly open the stores more and more quickly. That means we accelerate the rate at which stores actually get opened. And now we're growing to 232 stores rather than 186, and our profits are even higher at 2.38 million. So that is how learning takes place and how capability grows. This is a working model, and you can experiment with exactly this learning rate and exactly when the decisions to expand the store network take place. So here is the generic structure for learning and capability. Here's our profits on the right-hand side, and we've seen that the capability on the left feeds through the ability to open stores more quickly to grow company profits faster than they would otherwise have grown. Now, just imagine, though, we've already got, what's that? That's a 15% improvement in our profits after the end of that period compared with what they would otherwise have been. But what if we not only open the stores faster than 30 months, but we were also finding better stores, i.e. stores that could actually reach more consumers, and we could do it cheaper? We were not spending 1.1 million on opening each store, we're only spending 1 million or 0.9 million. So that's 3 capabilities, all of which are contributing to your profitability and your return on investment on the right-hand side of this model. And then ask yourself this: what if we were not only growing our capability in store opening, but also in merchandising, making sure we got the right products on the shelf to attract customers, if our purchasing was getting better, if our staff development was improving, and our marketing is getting better, and so on and so on and so on. So if you think about this small difference in performance we've got from just one piece of learning to grow one capability in this business, and then think about what if we had that power across the whole organisation and all these activities and capabilities, just how good could our performance be then?
I hope those few extracts have given you a sense of, first of all, the principle of a strategic architecture of resources driving performance, and also some of the extra frameworks that can be added to that. So what I suggest you do now is go and have a look at the course outline itself on the course pages, where you'll see much more information about what exactly we mean by each of the items on this picture.